This happened 2 years ago, at a small lake cabin in Lake Whitney, Texas. My parents used to take me there when I was a kid. It was a simple place, nothing fancy, but it had charm. Rustic wooden floors, an old porch swing, and a dock that creaked when you walked on it. I hadn't been back since I was maybe 13. That summer, I decided to take a solo weekend trip before starting a new job in Dallas. Life was about to change, and I wanted one last quiet escape before everything picked up speed again. Something about going back to a place from childhood felt grounding. I thought maybe it would help clear my head. It was late August. The days were still hot, but the nights were starting to cool off. The lake was nearly empty. No families, no boats, no neighbors. Just me and the sounds of crickets and water lapping against the dock. There's a specific kind of quiet that only exists in rural Texas. A stillness that's thick, like it's holding its breath. I felt it the second I stepped out of my car. The first night I was there, I grilled some food, read a book on the porch, and eventually headed inside to sleep. Around midnight, I went to brush my teeth, and that's when I noticed it. A faint, sour smell, like spoiled meat, coming from near the back deck. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a raccoon had died under there or something. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to a scraping sound. Just once or twice. It sounded like something dragging across the wooden floorboards, from below. Like nails or claws scratching in slow, measured strokes. I sat up, holding my breath. The cabin had no basement, just a crawl space under the house that, according to the rental listing, had been sealed off years ago. So what could be under there? I stayed awake for another hour, but the noise didn't come back. I told myself it was probably an animal and went back to sleep, but it took a long time to settle down. My brain wouldn't stop spinning, cycling through possibilities. The next morning, I made coffee and tried to shake it off. Took a canoe out on the lake, did some sketching, ate lunch on the porch. The breeze off the water was nice, and for a while it felt like nothing was wrong. I even forgot about the noise. That night, it came back. Again, right around 3:17 a.m. This time, louder. The same scraping sound, but followed by a soft thud. Then, dragging. Like something, or someone, was moving slowly under the cabin. It didn't sound random. It sounded intentional. Like a person dragging a heavy bag. Or maybe their own body. I lay there, frozen. Every creak of the house felt amplified. I couldn't bring myself to get up and look. My mind was racing, every logical thought clashing with the primal fear crawling up my spine. Eventually, after what felt like forever, the sounds stopped. In the morning, I finally worked up the nerve to investigate. I told myself I needed to be practical, that I was a grown adult and wasn't going to let some old floor noises ruin my trip. Behind the cabin, there was a stack of old firewood and some lawn chairs blocking part of the deck. I moved them aside and found a wooden panel that seemed looser than the rest. It didn't take much to pry it open. Behind it was a narrow opening, just big enough for someone to crawl through. I grabbed my flashlight and crouched down. What I found wasn't just a crawl space. It was a hidden area, maybe 10 feet deep and 5 feet wide. The floor was dirt, the walls were unfinished, but someone had clearly been living there. There was a thin, moldy mattress on the ground, crumpled snack wrappers, a few plastic bottles filled with yellowish liquid, an old backpack, some dirty clothes. The air was thick, stale, and had that same sour stench from the night before. And on the wall? Drawings. Dozens of them. They were sketches of me. One showed me reading on the porch, another showed me fishing. One was of me asleep in bed. They were all rough, like they'd been done quickly, but there was no mistaking it. The angles were too perfect, too specific. Whoever drew them had been watching me, closely, observing everything, every detail, every moment. Some of the drawings were so fresh, the pencil lines still looked shiny. My stomach turned. I backed out of the space and ran inside the cabin, locked every door and window. I stood there for a minute, just trying to breathe. My hands were shaking. I called the local sheriff's office. A deputy arrived about an hour later. His name was Ray, middle-aged guy, calm voice, clearly had seen his share of weird things in a small town. He checked the crawl space but said there was no one there now. Whoever had been staying down there was gone. Maybe they'd left after hearing me moving around. Ray said it wasn't unheard of for drifters or squatters to use empty cabins, especially during the off-season. Sometimes people would stay a few days and vanish, but he admitted this was more unusual than most cases he'd seen. He collected the drawings, took some photos, and promised to file a report. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said, "If I were you, I'd find somewhere else to sleep tonight." That was all the push I needed. I packed up my stuff and left that afternoon, cut the weekend short. A few days later, I got a follow-up call from the rental office. They wanted to ask me if I had noticed anything unusual during my stay. I asked why. They said the guests who stayed after me reported hearing noises from under the deck, too. The same time every night, just after 3 a.m. But when police came to investigate, the crawl space was once again empty. I couldn't get those drawings out of my head. They weren't just sketches. They were detailed, personal. One showed me tying my shoe, a moment I barely remembered myself. Another showed me drying off with a towel, caught mid-step as I turned back toward the cabin. These were things that only someone extremely close, maybe even just feet away, could have captured. That meant whoever was watching me had been watching very, very closely. There was no way they just stumbled across me. They had planned this, knew the cabin schedule, knew how to get in, knew how to stay quiet. A week after I got back to Dallas, I drove to a nearby outdoor store and bought motion detectors, locks, cameras. I wasn't even going back to the cabin. I just needed the peace of mind. And I haven't gone solo camping or stayed in any remote rentals since. I still think about that trip. The smell, the noise, the eyes on me when I thought I was alone. And I wonder if the person under the deck ever really left, or if they just got better at hiding. Last summer, I went solo hiking in Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. It was my last trip before classes started again. I had done a few solo hikes before, nothing too intense, just long weekends to disconnect. But this trip, something felt different. I arrived at the trailhead on a Friday morning. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, a bit humid, but normal for late August. I signed in at the ranger station and started my hike with a light pack, map, and my usual gear. My plan was simple, a 3-day loop through the forest, stopping at 2 marked campsites and returning to the trailhead Sunday afternoon. The first day went by smoothly. I passed 2 hikers going the opposite direction, but otherwise it was just me and the trail. The forest was thick and beautiful, sunbeams cutting through the leaves, casting golden light across the ferns. I stopped often to sketch, something I like to do to help remember the silence and stillness. That night, I set up camp near a small stream. The site was quiet. As I cooked dinner, the sun dipped below the trees, and the woods got darker than I remembered. I listened to a podcast until I dozed off. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. Then I heard it, clear and sharp. A bell. Just one ring. Faint, distant, like a cowbell or an old wind chime. Then silence. I sat in my sleeping bag, heart starting to race. I waited to hear it again, but nothing came. No wind, no footsteps, just stillness. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a dream or an animal knocking something over. I went back to sleep. The next morning, the forest felt normal again. I made breakfast, packed up, and kept moving. But as I hiked, I noticed something odd. Some of the trail blazes had changed color. Instead of the usual white or blue, they were gray. Dull, hard to spot. I thought maybe they were old or someone marked a new trail, but the gray marks didn't match anything on my map. Still, I followed the path, thinking maybe I missed a recent update. Around noon, I came across a strange cairn. It was a stack of stones, but not like a normal trail marker. This one was too symmetrical, almost like someone had built it as a monument. I stood there, staring at it, feeling uneasy. Something about it felt off, like it didn't belong. I took a picture and kept moving. That evening, I found a clearing off the path and set up camp. The air felt heavier than before. As night came, I heard the bell again. Twice this time. Same soft chime. Closer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the tent, scanning the trees. Nothing. The woods were silent. Too silent. That night, I barely slept. I kept my knife in hand and lay awake, listening to every crack of a branch, every shift of the wind. I didn't hear footsteps, but I felt something. A presence. Like someone watching from just beyond the tree line. The next morning, I broke camp before sunrise. I planned to cut my trip short. My nerves were shot. I just wanted to get out of there. But the trail markers were gone. I walked for miles trying to retrace my steps, but nothing looked familiar. The forest began to feel deeper, denser, like it was folding in on itself. My GPS flickered. No signal. The compass spun. The sun overhead looked strange, like it was brighter than normal, but without warmth. Then I saw the shack. It wasn't on any map. It wasn't even near a trail. I stumbled on it while trying to find my bearings. The structure looked abandoned, wooden slats weathered to gray, a rusted tin roof, one broken window. The door was partially open. Against every instinct, I went inside. It was small, just one room, dirt floor, a few broken crates. But on the far wall, carved into the wood, were symbols, circles, lines intersecting, shapes that looked like eyes or spirals, all etched with care. In one corner was a pile of stones. At first I thought it was a collapsed part of the roof, but nestled in the pile were small bones and teeth, human-sized. I stumbled out of the shack and ran, blindly crashing through underbrush until I reached a creek. I dropped to my knees trying to catch my breath. That's when I saw the figure. Across the creek, behind a thin veil of trees, stood someone. Still. Facing away. They didn't move. Didn't make a sound. I called out. Nothing. I backed away, eyes locked on the figure. When I blinked, they were gone. I ran. I don't even remember the direction. I just moved. Branches whipped my arms. My legs burned. Eventually, I found what looked like a path, worn dirt, faint footprints. I followed it, but every turn led back to the same spot. The shack. It was impossible. The sun began to set. My pack was nearly empty. No cell service, no radio. That night I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against a tree, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. And then, the bell again. This time it was right behind me. I spun around, nothing. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling me. I stood and shouted, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a whisper. Not words, just sound. like someone exhaling through clenched teeth. I ran again. No direction, just away. I don't remember how long I ran. Hours? Minutes? Time felt broken. Eventually, I found a gravel service road. I collapsed on it. Just lay there. A ranger truck found me at dawn. I couldn't explain what happened. I just told them I got lost. They drove me back to the station, gave me food, water, asked if I saw any landmarks. When I mentioned the shack, their expressions changed. One ranger said quietly, "That area's been closed off since the 80s. Too many disappearances." I asked if they had records. They said no. Everything was unofficial. People went in, never came out. Before I left, one of them told me, "Whatever you heard, whatever you saw, it's best you don't go looking for it again." Back home, I tried to forget it, but I couldn't. I started hearing the bell again, in dreams, sometimes when I was walking alone. Once, I swear I heard it outside my apartment window in the middle of the night. I looked. Nothing. I haven't gone hiking since. I threw away my gear, canceled the trips I'd planned, but I still can't sleep through the night. Because I know it's still out there, whatever it was. And I think it remembers me. This happened in Greenville, South Carolina, during the last week of August, just before the start of college. Our old neighborhood pool was closing down for good. It had been there forever, probably since the 1960s. The city had finally decided to demolish it, after years of complaints about the aging pipes and cracks in the concrete. So, my friends and I thought, why not throw one last party? There were 6 of us: me, Darren, Kyle, Jesse, Lila, and Marcus. We'd all grown up in that neighborhood, and that pool had been part of nearly every summer we could remember. Birthday parties, swim meets, lazy days with popsicles. That place was our childhood. It felt only right to say goodbye in our own way. We got permission from the groundskeeper, who agreed to let us have one last night there, so long as we kept things clean and didn't make a mess. He tossed us the keys, told us to lock up when we were done, and left us to it. We brought a speaker, some snacks, a cooler of drinks, and even a few floaties for the nostalgia. The sun was setting as we arrived, painting the pool surface orange and gold. Everything looked a little faded, like the color had drained from the walls and tiles over the years. But to us, it still felt magical. The evening started like any good summer night. Music playing low, everyone joking, splashing around, reminiscing. Someone suggested a game of chicken. Darren and Kyle climbed onto our shoulders, nearly tipping over 3 times before they both collapsed into the deep end, laughing. We stayed in the water for hours, talking about how weird it would be to leave for college. Some of us were staying in South Carolina, others going out of state. This was it. The last time we'd all be together for who knew how long. At one point, we turned all the pool lights off and just floated on our backs, looking at the stars. The water was cold by then, and the night sky was full of constellations we didn't recognize. Everything was quiet, except for the occasional ripple. It wasn't until well after dark that things started to shift. I remember I was sitting on the edge of the pool, legs dangling in, when Darren stopped mid-sentence and pointed toward the deep end. "Do you guys see that?" he asked. We all turned to look. At first, none of us saw anything, just ripples. Then, I noticed it. There was a shape, faint but definitely there, standing upright beneath the surface. It looked like a person, standing completely still at the bottom of the pool. No bubbles, no movement, just a figure. Lila gasped and asked if someone had jumped in and held their breath as a prank, but no one had. Marcus slid into the water and swam closer, diving down with his flashlight app on. A second later, he popped back up. "There's nothing there," he said, wiping water from his face. "It's empty." But it wasn't. We all saw it. Darren was unsettled. I swear I saw someone. They were just standing there. We all kind of laughed it off, made jokes about ghosts and chlorine hallucinations. But there was tension now. Everyone felt it. The air felt heavier, the water colder. We turned the music up again and tried to act normal, but Darren kept glancing at the deep end. Eventually, he got out of the pool, wrapped himself in a towel, and sat silently near the fence. About 30 minutes later, he was gone. We noticed, when someone asked where he went, that no one had an answer. We figured maybe he walked home or needed some air. His stuff, towel, phone, keys, was still sitting on the chair. We searched the parking lot, checked the bathrooms, even walked up the street calling his name. No sign of him. We tried to stay calm. Maybe he was messing with us. Maybe he wanted to scare us for fun. But Darren didn't come back. We ended up calling his parents and then the police. The search began that night. They interviewed all of us separately, asking if there had been drinking, if Darren had been upset, if he'd talked about running away. But none of that fit. Darren was normal. Quiet, maybe, but grounded. He'd been excited about starting school. The next morning, they drained the pool. There was no body, no evidence, nothing at all. Just an old pool with fading tiles and a faint crack at the deep end. They questioned us again. Some officers implied maybe Darren had run away or left without telling anyone. But that didn't make sense. His wallet was in his backpack. His shoes were right there. And we would have seen him leave. There was only one exit. After the second round of questioning, they let us go. But we were shaken. And something weird started happening. We stopped talking to each other. Not out of anger, just guilt. Silence. Everyone seemed to retreat. I texted Jessie a few times, but she barely responded. Kyle moved to Arizona. Marcus dropped out of college a month later. Lila posted a long message about grief on Instagram, then deleted all her social media. And me? I couldn't stop thinking about the pool. The nights were the worst. I kept seeing that figure, just hovering in the water, still, watching. I went back 2 weeks later. The place was fenced off, but the demolition hadn't started yet. I climbed over one night and stood at the edge of the drained pool. I stared at the bottom, now just cracked concrete and leaves. Then I saw them. Scratches. Dozens of thin, curved lines etched deep into the cement near the drain. They looked like fingernail marks, clawing outward, like someone had been trying to climb out from underneath. I got down on my knees and touched them. They were real. The air around me felt different then. Still. Not just quiet, but empty. Like the world was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A soft ripple. Even though there was no water. I stood and stepped back quickly, heart pounding. The bottom of the pool was dry, but for a second, I could swear, I saw a dark shadow flick across the shallow end. I left immediately, climbed the fence, and ran to my car. Didn't look back. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about Darren, about the sound of the water, about that shadow. I wanted to tell someone. I almost called his mom, but what would I even say? 2 days later, the demolition crew came and tore the whole place down. 2 days later, the demolition crew came and tore the whole place down, bulldozed it flat. Rebar, concrete, pipes, everything gone. They hauled it all away in huge trucks, replaced the lot with gravel. They're building a new housing complex there now. Condos, families. But I still think about that night. About Darren. About the figure under the water. About those scratches. There was something in that pool. I know it. And I think it's still out there. And maybe it's waiting for someone else to look down and see it. Or worse, maybe it's already moved on to somewhere else.